We are back yet again. Logical fallacy for the day is a loaded question, asking a question that has an assumption built into it so that it can't be answered without appearing guilty. Grace and Helen were both romantically interested in Brad. One day, with Brad sitting within earshot, Grace asked in an inquisitive tone whether Helen was having any problems with a fungal infection. The question implies that the fungal infection exists when in fact it doesn't. The classic one of this is, are you still beating your wife? No, you can't answer that question without appearing guilty. Loaded questions are silly. They're just underhanded tactics. Just don't do them. Like that's really the answer here. Just don't do them. Let's go ahead and get on the show. Welcome back to Reason to Refrain, where it is my goal for you to know what you believe and why you believe it, and to preach the gospel of resurrection by grace alone, through faith alone, over and over again. I am your host, Stephen Curto. Please feel free to talk back to the show by emailing Stephen@reasonedrefrain.com. That's Stephen, Stephen, the correct spelling, at reasonedrefrain.com. Drink of the day is Monkey Shoulder Blended Scotch. I have had many people recommend this scotch to me. And honestly, it had always struck me as one of those scotches that people who don't really drink scotch recommend. Everyone who had ever recommended it to me, it was like, oh yeah, I don't really know scotch that well, but I had this one bottle that I really liked. It's not bad. It is a blended scotch, so if you like blended scotches instead of single malts, definitely for the price, I'd say give it a try. It doesn't have any real pronounced flavor profiles. It kind of tastes like primarily Highland. A little bit of the fruit that you get from like a Campbellton, and pretty mellow. A good introductory scotch. We are going to go ahead and get into the meat segment.
The meat segment.
Definitely eat something's flesh. I want meat!
For the meat segment today, I kind of want to just think out loud about a problem that I've observed within Christendom. This is not even just within Christendom, within humanity. A question of thought and logic and epistemology. How do we know what we know? How do we believe what we believe? It has to do with the question of what is primary versus what is secondary versus what is tertiary. If you've never heard these terms, like what are the things that are essential to Christianity? What are the closed-handed doctrines, and what are the open-handed doctrines would be another way I've heard explained. What are the doctrines where we don't break fellowship, but what are the doctrines that we do break fellowship over? I've heard those sorts of distinctions. Basically, what are the requirements that bring a particular truth claim or particular doctrine from the realm of what's the word I'm trying to think of charitable disagreement into the realm of die on this hill. And as a largely non-denominational, largely reformed Christian, I do not have a good answer to this question. And my problem isn't, my Catholic, my covenant, my denominational friends are going to have a clearer answer to this question. The answer is, well, my creed or my confession tells me what is essential, and that's how I go about it. If it's in the creed or the confession, that answers it, and that's the deal. That helps me to sort of decide. And those of us who are big on sola scriptura, and particularly, I don't want to commit the error of mixing up sola scriptura and solo scriptura. I do think creeds and confessions and doctrinal statements are helpful. I have doctrinal statements. I've written doctrinal statements. I do have a personal systematic theology, but I am very, very hesitant to ever bank on my systematic theology. I pretty consistently, at least I try to pretty consistently err on the side of changing my theology if the scriptures indicate one way or the other. And I know that my brothers who hold to confessions are going to say, "Oh, I do that too," but do you really? I've had many a conversation where a justification for a belief came not from the scriptures clearly saying it, but because a creed or confession clearly said it, or the systematic theology pointed in a certain direction. And so then I draw this conclusion from my systematic theology, and then I just apply the transitive principles. Systematic theology is based on the Bible, and therefore the conclusion that my systematic theology generates must be biblical. And that's a little bit of a fallacy. I just can't go there. And so I'm left essentially going, I don't really have a firm, slam dunk, lockdown answer for these are the things that are primary doctrines. These are the things that are absolutely non-negotiable, which creates a problem, particularly when I hold to things as firmly as I do. I think every Christian has a set of doctrines that they would consider primary, and every Christian has a set of doctrines that they would consider secondary. And generally speaking, there are a few key doctrines that most every Christian has affirmed down through the ages. Or very, very early in church history, it was determined this is something that we're not going to negotiate. This is something that we can't just disagree charitably about. This is a make or break issue. One of those good example is the Trinity. The church spent about 300 years arguing about how to talk about the Trinity, and then they landed on a decision: 3 persons, 1 essence, and confusing the persons, modalism, tritheism, Unitarianism. These are all outside the bounds of what we would call Orthodox Christianity. That's an essential doctrine. Justification by grace would be a quote, essential doctrine to Christianity. Now, by grace alone would, throughout church history, not be universally understood as an essential doctrine. I would consider it pretty darn essential. I think that if you are justified by any means other than sheer grace, if you believe that, then you are not believing Christian truth. What do we do with those sorts of disagreements that are very, very important? And then, so questions of justification, questions of the gospel usually are the ones that get pointed to as the essential doctrines, the things that deal with whether or not you'll make it to the resurrection. And then things that are usually lumped into the secondary category would be things like mode of baptism, or even view of baptism, view of communion, practice of worship, right? Do you sing from the Psalter or from the hymnal or from the PowerPoint screen or from memory? Do you not sing at all? Do you use instruments? Most people would put these into the secondary category. We can disagree about these things. They're strong preferences. We might even say that they come from biblical basis and develop biblical arguments for our view on these things. But I think most Christians would generally put those into the secondary category. But not all. What goes in the primary category, what goes in the secondary category, and more importantly, what I want to think about here is how do you decide what goes in the primary category versus what goes in the secondary category? What's your rule? And to my mind, the only thing that I can think of that comes close to defining this is what has the Bible very, very clearly stated, and what has the Bible not as clearly stated. If the Bible has very, very clearly stated it, for it is by grace that you are saved through faith, not of yourselves. This is the gift of God. This is not of works, lest any man should boast. If the Bible very clearly states it, I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. But there you go. A whole lot of Christians, who I would say are Christians, would say, oh, that second one's not very clearly stated. It's not as clear. I think they just don't want to admit that it's clear because they don't want to submit to what the Bible clearly says. So I'm still left with a subjective standard, a subjective rule. The level of clarity or lack thereof is based on my own subjective understanding of the Bible. How clear do I think the Bible is about this thing versus how clear someone else thinks the Bible is about this thing. Every single person, let alone every single Christian, has some sort of a taxonomy, has some sort of a categorization of what's primary, what's secondary, what are the things that they'll just kind of put up with disagreeing over versus what are the things that they'll die for. And nobody's system, no two people's systems are exactly alike. And this bothers me. The fact that we don't really have a clear, inspired by God, primary versus secondary versus tertiary delineator, a rule, kind of bothers me. I do have to admit that while I can make arguments, and I think I make pretty good arguments, that there are certain things that the Bible is extremely clear about, that they are non-negotiable, that you cannot believe this other thing and still be a Christian, it is ultimately my own reading of Scripture. At a certain point, that argument breaks down and we devolve into nonsense. If we're going to communicate, if words mean things, they have to mean certain things. And so there are some things in Scripture that I think are completely just, you cannot claim to believe that the Bible is true and defines doctrine for the church, and yet hold to this truth that is so contrary to Scripture. Something along the lines of Jesus is not Lord, or Satan is the supreme ruler of the universe, or humans don't really exist. We're simply a figment of an imagination, or God didn't create. Those sorts of claims, all of those are very clear, in my opinion, in the Bible. And I think that if you try to argue that they're not very clear in the Bible, you have to end up arguing that the Bible simply does not mean what it says, that language itself is unintelligible, and you can never know anything that the Bible ever says, in which case you're not trying to build your faith on the Bible, you're trying to build it on your own opinions. Still, I have to repeat, I don't have that slam dunk lockdown. Well, here's the standard. Here's the dividing line between primary and secondary doctrine. And I wish I did. So I guess this is a kind of a call to Christians out there. I would like to hear from you. What is your standard? What's your dividing line? What rule do you follow to determine that which is primary versus that which is secondary? What is the thing to which you appeal for making those sorts of distinctions? Go ahead and send them to Stephen@reasonedrefrain.com. I'd love to hear STEPHEN @reasonedrefrain, REASONEDREFRAIN.com. The other piece of the meat segment that I wanted to cover today deals with a Facebook video that my mother shared. And so this is something that I would definitely say falls into the secondary doctrine category. Why do I say that? Well, I don't really know. Just think it does. I think that the Bible doesn't have as much to say about this as it maybe does with others. But I do think that it says some stuff. And this is a comedy routine by Michael Jr. I think his most famous bit is probably the talking about James, the brother of Jesus. He didn't realize that that Jesus had a brother named James, and so I must have been so tough being Jesus's little brother. I think you're at a party and somebody says, "Oh, we're out of wine." I bet everybody looked at James. I go, "Your brother Jesus fixed this problem." Anyway, this is another routine about dog names, and I found this interesting for two reasons. One, because of the theology of pets, zoology, in the Christian sense. What does it mean to be a pet owner? How are we supposed to steward these creatures that God has given us? And I think that the dichotomy that he points out and pokes at and laughs at in this video highlights a distinction of correct theology versus incorrect theology concerning pets and ownership. But the other thing that struck me about this video was just how racist he is, and everyone's okay with it. What he does in this video, what most people do, and I would even probably say what all people do, because all people are racist to some degree. What he does is he blurs the lines between skin color and culture, blurs the lines between practice and the color of one's skin, and suggests that if you have a particular skin color, you must behave in a certain way. Now, I would decry that as racist, judging someone and the way someone behaves based on the color of that person's skin, racist. Still, the fact, and this is where the reality of racism in the modern age actually plays out, and most people confuse. The reality is that there are certain cultural values that get imbibed among people who group together because of some physical marker. And in one case, it's skin color is the physical marker around which people group. And then a culture develops. Just like in any subculture, people who get together because of a physical marker of baldness or height or short people or there's plenty of physical markers that people identify with and then develop a culture surrounding that thing. Physical disabilities, same thing. A certain culture develops. Now, to what degree is that culture linked with the physical marker? I think it should be none, unless it's particularly related to that thing. If tall people are all getting together talking about what it's like to be tall, and then decrying the way that society treats those who are tall in ways that actually do relate to a person's height. If you go to it, if you're in a grouping together because everyone in the group has legs that are longer than 5 feet, and society at large never makes space for people who's you're in a theater and the space that is given for someone to sit down is only for people with 4 feet, legs that are 4 feet or shorter. That's an actual something that relates to the physical trait. And so in those cases, it makes sense. But here we're looking at culture. We're looking at values and we're looking at actions, and we're linking that with skin color. And I think that's wrong. I think that's racist. But this is the kind of racism that everyone engages in. This is the kind of racism that everyone in the audience is laughing at. It's okay to just recognize that this is, for some reason, the values in this culture have come about differently than the values in this other culture. And in this case, I think the values, the theology that gets imbibed by these two cultures, I think is really interesting to note. All that as a precursor. Let's jump into his little routine.
So I have a theory about dog names. This is a theory. I'm not saying this theory is 100%, just letting you know it's a theory I have about dog names. We're going to check the theory right here in your city. We're going to just check the theory, I don't know for sure. So here's my theory. It seems like my white friends, when I talk about my white friends, I'm including the white people in this room. It seems like my white friends, most of the time, give their dogs human names. Black people, not so much. I could be wrong. I don't know. Let's find out. If you're a white person, you have a dog, raise your hand. If you're a white person with a dog, cool. I'd like to talk to this lady right here with a striped. She got a striped shirt on, blue jeans. Yeah. Can you give her the microphone? Cool. Yeah, she got a mic for you so everybody can hear you. What is your name?
Angela.
Angela, cool. First of all, Angela, what kind of dog do you have?
She is a Shibu Inu.
Shibu Indian. Okay, we on the right track already. We on the right track. Yeah, that is not a black dog. That's not a black dog.
Point out, it's funny, but the concept of a white dog and a black dog, what he's actually saying is people who associate with subculture and who group together based on skin color who have black skin don't generally own dogs of that breed. But you cut through it with that's not a black dog. That's racist. It's also funny, and it's the kind of racism that we should just laugh at. Unfortunately, we live in a culture that can't laugh at anything anymore.
And what is your dog's name?
Haley.
Thanks for playing along. Need another white person with a dog. I'm looking for another white person with a dog. Yes, you gotta go give her the mic. You can give her the microphone. Cool. And what is your name?
Laurie.
Laurie. And what kind of dog do you have?
Well, I have a border terrier.
Okay, cool. Did you get him on the border?
No.
And
Not quiet.
your laugh is amazing, by the way. I just want to throw that out there. That little at the end, that's pretty awesome. Okay, and what is your dog's name?
Caleb.
Thanks for playing along.
So he's pointing out that it seems like white people name their dogs with human names, and then he's going to contrast this with black people. Let's jump down near the end where he talks to some black people about their dogs.
She don't know where it came from. That's a black Jasmine. Where'd you get your dog from?
All right. Talks to this lady, Jasmine.
Cool. And what is your name?
Jasmine.
Jasmine. Where'd you get your dog from?
My sister, she brought it home, and it looks like wishbone.
So she brought the dog. So you didn't pay no money for the dog. That's the point, right? That's what I'm saying right there. Okay. All right. And what kind of dog is it?
It looks like wishbones. I don't know.
I have no idea what you're talking about right now. What is your dog's name?
Coco.
That's what I'm talking about right there. That's what I'm saying right there. That's a black dog. That is a black dog. She don't know where it came from. She don't know what kind of dog it is. She just named it Coco. That is so awesome.
Pointing out that in this other subculture, we don't really take care. I skipped over the part where he talks to this guy who has a dog with like a lord's name. He's got like 5 names and he's paid a whole bunch of money for this particular breed and everything. And it's like, yeah, that's not how the black culture works.
All right, I'm gonna go with one more brother. I need a black person with a dog. One more. I want a brother with a dog. A black person with a dog. Yeah, a brother right there. Right. You could. Yeah. Right. Boom. There he is. Keep your hand up. Yeah. What's your name?
It's Brandon.
Brandon. Cool. Well, what kind of dog do you have, Brandon?
I have a pit mix.
Pit mix. That's what I'm talking about. A pit mutt. Okay. And what is your dog's name?
Coco.
When was the last time you saw your dog?
He looks over at the first woman and says, "When's the last time you saw your dog?" What I find interesting about this from a theological perspective, aside from all of the interesting things about race and racism and how we treat race in our culture, there's a very clear difference here. And I've observed this difference myself, that a lot of Christians, and particularly evangelical Christians. I'll go ahead and say white just because of that's the category that he created. I don't know that it's exclusive to race. I don't think it's about race, but it might be one of those things that came about as a part of a subculture associated with races. I see a lot of people treating dogs or pets in general as if they are equal to humans, and they are not. And what he's observing is just another indicator that people have a very bad zoology. The white people in the audience are naming their dogs human names because they think of their dogs as human-like. They think of their dogs as if they are people, and they're not. We are progressively trading in, particularly the procreation, the bearing and rearing of children. We're replacing it with pet ownership. And I use that word, ownership. You are not your dog's mommy. You are not your dog's daddy. Your dog is not a member of the family. It is a thing that you own. And that's the proper way to look at it. It can be a thing that you own that you love. You can love your pets. You should love your pets. We are designed to steward these creatures. That is why we were created, to cultivate and keep the garden, the animals being part of it. So should you care about your dog? Should you love your dog? Should you treat it as more important than the inanimate things that you own? Yes, there's a taxonomy here. Like we were talking about with your taxonomy of theology, your taxonomy of ownership should change as well. Some things are more important than other things, and living, breathing mammals are more important than non-living, non-breathing objects. Yes, true. They still are not all equal if they're all breathing. That's dumb. And when you buy into that lie and you start exchanging families for pet ownership, you are selling yourself short. You are not experiencing what you were designed for, and you're not. You are choosing a worse life. To put it in really inflammatory terms, you are choosing a worse life. You could be pursuing the thing for which you're designed, parenthood or adoption, parenthood through adoption, bearing and rearing of children, and instead you have decided arbitrarily that pet ownership is just as good, if not, better. And ultimately, it comes back to selfishness, as basically everything does. The reason that you want to exchange parenthood for pet ownership is because pet ownership does not require as much from you as parenthood does. It also does not give you as much. The benefits are diminished along with the responsibility, as is so often the case in life. Benefits increase with increased responsibility. This happens in the workplace. It happens in the life place as well. The more responsibilities you take on, the more net benefits you experience. And so it's just kind of a springboard for me to complain about one of the things that I love complaining about, which is dog parents. People who treat their dogs as if they're kids. Stop it. Just stop it. Okay? All right? Thank you. Oh, I'm glad we could be done with that. We're going to move along to my 3 favorite more or less news stories from the last week, more or less.
It's my 3 favorite news stories,
more or less,
from the last week.
Yeah, so 3 favorite news stories. First off, one that I just kind of want to think about with you on the air. So we're looking at, if you're watching, we're looking at the Independent Sentinel. This was basically the one that I could find that talked about it the most. There have been a surprising number of fires at food processing plants in recent months. And when I first heard about this, I thought, yeah, that's conspiracy theory stuff, don't put too much stock in that sort of thing. And I still don't put too much stock in this sort of thing. However, the amount of fires and the cause of the fires perked my ears a bit. So I'm just going to start reading this article from the Independent Sentinel, and just I think it's worth noting and worth keeping an eye on. Why the sudden rash of food processing plant fires? Many who know Joe Biden know that every once in a while he says the quiet parts out loud. An example occurred on October 24th, 2020, just before the November 3rd general election, with Biden saying, "We have put together, I think, the most extensive, inclusive voter fraud organization." Yeah, slip of the tongue. We did talk about the food shortages. And so Biden warned in a Brussels news conference related to a meeting of NATO members. We did talk about food shortages, and it's going to be real. The price of these sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia. It's imposed upon an awful lot of countries as well, including European countries and our country as well. He tried to make the point that both Russia and Ukraine are global trading partners and providers of wheat, but then must have realized that lie would come back to bite him. So he pointed out that the U.S. and Canada are both major wheat producers, too. Okay. The FBI warns a significant disruption of grain production could impact the entire food chain, since grain is not only consumed by humans but also used for animal feed. In addition, a significant disruption of grain and corn production could impact commodities trading and stocks. This warning comes as an increased number of events of fires and explosions have been reported at food processing facilities across the country recently. Tucker Carlson on April 22nd went ahead and covered this particular event. And at first I was thinking, just kind of conspiracy theory. And if you're watching, there's a chart here of them. Friday, August 9th, Tyson Food Incorporated fire. Tuesday, January 12th, Deli Star Meat Plant fire. Sunday, July 25th. Okay, I'm just going to read the dates, okay? January 12th, July 25th, August 24th, September 13th, November 20th, December 12th. Those are all in 2021. Then we get to 2022. January 1st, January 14th, January 21st, February 1st, February 3rd, February 15th, February 25th, March 13th, March 16th, March 28th, March 31st, April 11th, April 13th, April 13th, April 18th, April 21st, April 30th, May 11th, May 28th, June 7th so far. And the cause of these, what caught my eye was the fact that multiple of them were caused by plane crashes. In particular, Wednesday, April 13th, Gem State Processing in Hayburn, Idaho, plane crash destroyed this place. And then April 21st, a week later, General Mills, Covington, Georgia, plane crash. There are a couple of explosions and mostly fires down the list. It's kind of unusual for planes to crash into buildings and destroy them. One famous occurrence of this you might remember from roughly 20 years ago. The fact that it happened with two similar kinds of plants weeks apart, in conjunction with a string of fires throughout the country, at the very least, the evidence is noteworthy. It might still be coincidence. It might just be a correlation that does not equal causation. But the fact that so many are happening it's not completely outside the realm of possibility that some foreign actor decided, hey, we could maybe disrupt and weaken the West if we destroy the United States' ability to produce wheat and corn. Yeah, I mean, that would be one valid way of trying to terrorize our nation, and not particularly outside the realm of possibility, in my opinion. So it's something to keep an eye on. Second favorite news story, Pixar's Lightyear. completely collapsed at the box office. Reading from CNN Business, Pixar's Lightyear fizzles at the box office. Now, I want you to know, I'm going to read big portions of this. I want you to listen for what's missing, right? Listen for the argument from silence. What do they not mention as an explanation for why Lightyear bombed at the box office? Here we go. The latest film from Disney Pixar, Lightyear, which features the voice work of Chris Evans as Buzz Lightyear, opened to an estimated $51 million at the North American box office this weekend. That number came in way under industry expectations, which projected the film to make around $70 million. The movie took in $85 million worldwide, according to Disney. The film also failed to grab the top spot at the box office, opening at number 2 behind the second weekend of Universal's Jurassic World Dominion, which made an estimated $58.6 million. That's really bad. It was the only major movie opening that weekend, and it still didn't come in number 1. And it opened the weekend of Father's Day, which you would think Father's Day might be a time where, fathers come home and say, I need to do something special. Let's take the kids out for a movie. The opening is a disappointing launch for Pixar. And then it lists that, Pixar usually has successes. To give some context to how Lightyear did compared to other Pixar films, it's on the back end. Puts it behind 2017's Cars 3. So here's where they explain why Lightyear wasn't a bigger hit. The film is based on characters from the popular Toy Story series, and it notched a 77% review on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a solid, if not spectacular score. Not a spectacular score, it's an okay score. But several factors could have dampened turnout. Let's see. For starters, it may have been difficult for audiences to know what exactly the film was about. It's not quite a Toy Story movie, since Lightyear was marketed as a film about the man behind the toy rather than the toy itself. Unfortunately, families may have been confused about the film, and that could have steered them away. Generally speaking, confusion about a film, not usually a factor for Pixar, at least, right? They said, hey, we're going to make a movie about talking cars, and we were like, yeah, all right, let's go see it. They were like, hey, we're going to make a movie about talking fish, and we were all like, well, okay, let's go see it. Like, hey, we're going to make a movie about a robot on a deserted planet who goes and has a love connection with another robot in space. Okay, yeah, let's go see it. So the concept that this is a movie about a movie, that's a bit weak. This is also the first Pixar movie to be released in theaters since 2020. The studio's last 3 films, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red, all went directly to Disney+. The choice to send those films to streaming may have prompted audiences to stay home and wait for Lightyear to hit Disney+, rather than buy a ticket. Begs the question, how did the second weekend of another movie do all right if everybody's, wanting to stay home and stream? Elsewhere at the box office, Top Gun Maverick continues to do well, and the Paramount film starring Tom Cruise in third place with $44 million for its 4th week. It barely beat out the 4th week of another film. Did you notice what's missing? What they didn't mention? It's all the gay stuff. Turns out that the alphabet crowd, the sexual perversion crowd who prefers to identify themselves purely by the sexual perversion that they find most appealing, that is an accurate representation of what we're talking about. That was a big part of Lightyear. If you hadn't heard, over the last few months, Lightyear prominently featured a lesbian kiss scene, and there was a prominently featured lesbian love story embedded in the plot line. And Pixar had removed it, and then in response to the so-called Don't Say Gay bill in Florida, they put it back in as a statement, a political statement. And everybody said, hey, we're not going to go see that movie because of that. It's not just that Lightyear failed at the box office. What's particularly noteworthy is the full-out spin. the full-out spin of, well, the reason must be it was confusing, and you streaming platforms of some sort. No, it was all the gay stuff. Stop turning the toys gay. Last news story was what's her name? Jennifer Granholm, Biden's energy secretary. She went on MSNBC and said something that I found very funny. She was being interviewed by Mika and Joe, I think those are their names, over on the MSNBC. And they asked her about gas prices. Now, there are a lot of reasons why gas prices are high. They're all working together. Not the least of which is the Biden administration's policy on domestic drilling and the Biden administration's outright decision that they will not allow new drilling to take place out of their whole green initiative. They've taken a lot of steps to restrict drilling here in the States and local oil companies producing oil. Other things that are contributing to the price of gas would be the war in Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine going at it, and both countries being large producers of oil on the world market, as well as rampant inflation that's making everything more expensive, including price of oil and gas. But here's, after you can go find the clip. It's if you Google Biden is calling on oil producers to produce more, MSNBC, you'll find this little interview with Jennifer Granholm. She said something, though, that I thought was really funny. So this is kind of the sum up at the end of this whole explanation of why the prices of oil look higher, but they're really not, and you need to not worry because Biden's got it all under control. Then she got to this little nugget.
Ties. Yeah, you obviously understand this very well, Mika. I mean, clearly, when the EU is deciding to cut off Russian supply of oil and gas, that too causes a crimp in supply, and it causes prices to go up. So, to your point, yes, ultimately, the solution to make us energy secure, to make the Baltic states energy secure, to make the entire world energy secure, is to move to clean energy.
Well, I mean, of course, the answer is just give up your entire way of life, right? Move to clean energy. That's what they actually want, right? She said the quiet part out loud. She accidentally said the truth, which is, well, yeah, we're trying to force you to not use fossil fuels, and we're going to do that by making your life miserable if you continue to use them. And yes, we could stop doing that. We could stop making your life miserable, but this is good for you. This is what you need so that you can become a better person and move to clean energy. But then she says this.
No country has ever been held hostage to access to the sun or to access to the wind. Ultimately, those are the price volatility continues to, at least on clean energy, there's no volatility. It continues to drop. We're not under the thumb of petro dictators. And ultimately, that is the solution. But
no country has ever been held hostage to the sun or hostage to the wind. Jen, every single agrarian society through all of human history has been held hostage to the sun and the wind, as you put it, to famine. Have you ever heard of famine or drought? These are things that existed prior to the widespread production of, you guessed it, fossil fuels. Yes. Countries have been held hostage to the sun and the wind. That's exactly why this industry exists. You've gotten the point exactly wrong. Well done. You might have noticed that I didn't mention anything about Roe v. Wade in my 3 favorite news stories from the last week this week. And basically, I want to actually have time to sit down and read the whole opinion and then give you a more informed view. Obviously, I'm very, very excited that Roe v. Wade has been overturned and that the issue will be going back to the states. But what I'd like to do is just spend a good chunk of the meat segment next week talking about the opinion itself and going through some of the logic of it. So that's why I haven't really mentioned it here. I wanted to give it a little nod. We're going to move on to I'm a Good Person.
For example,
For I'm a Good Person this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about a supposed holiday that took place a few weeks ago that is broadly usually called Juneteenth. Juneteenth, we're currently in Juneteenth, I think is what we're on now. 10 days after Juneteenth. You can probably tell by that joke that I don't much care for Juneteenth, but I wanted to try and give it a fair shake, and I wanted to give it some time removed from the actual date on the calendar, so that's why we're looking at it a little bit late. But what is Juneteenth supposed to be? Well, supposedly, it celebrates the day that the news of the Emancipation Proclamation reached the last group of slaves in Galveston, Texas. That's what it's supposed to be marking, June 19th, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation itself. This group of slaves in Galveston, Texas, heard the news that they were free according to the Emancipation Proclamation. Here's the problem. That's what it supposedly is. What it actually is a very recently made-up marker in order to prove a person's woke bona fides. That's why it's in the I'm a Good Person segment. I guarantee nobody listening to this show ever heard of Juneteenth before about 4 years ago. Because nobody talked about it before about 4 years ago. It wasn't a thing. Because it was made up so that the woke crowd would have another thing by which they could control, manipulate, and virtue signal the rest of society. That's essentially my problem with it. But I have a few more nuanced things so to start off with, the reason I'm against Juneteenth, well, it's because you insist, you woke crazy person insist that I have to care about it. When you start doing that, I start going, well, I think I'm going to not. But let's back up a smidge and say let's give it a fair shake. I think that it's a bad holiday mostly because it's an arbitrary marker of an unprovable historical event. The Emancipation Proclamation, like, we can record, here's the date, here's where the truth that black people were no longer enslaved based on the color of their skin in our society. We mark that date. We should celebrate that date. By moving it one step removed and arguing that, well, it wasn't real until every single person in the States heard about it and where it was released, moves the argument into the subjective realm. It stokes the rule of feelings over the rule of law, over the rule of truth and facts and reality. The reality is those slaves were freed at the Emancipation Proclamation. Well, I mean, the reality is those slaves were freed at the conclusion of the Civil War. But, like, as far as the law was concerned of the Union, the slaves were already freed. And so that's what we should mark and remember. Because, I have to point this out, how do you know that those were the last slaves who heard that they were free? Seriously, how are we sure that those are the last slaves who heard about the Emancipation Proclamation and understood their freedom and celebrated it? We think those were the last ones, but we don't know. We can't mark that day in history for sure that was when freedom finally actually truly did reach every single person. If we want to celebrate that date, we have to know for sure, and we simply can't. A common fact about history is a lot of it goes unreported. And so when you're going to celebrate a particular mark in history, a particular event, you have to celebrate the known, not the unknown. You have to celebrate the objective, not the subjective. So it bothers me that this holy day, this holiday, this marker of a historical event is supposedly marking something that we can't really prove and might not actually even be the thing that it's celebrating. It pushes everything into the realm of subjectivity instead of objectivity. Other thing, it's a dumb holiday name. Juneteenth. there's you're celebrating your at least July 4th is an actual date. Juneteenth isn't a word. I don't know what day Juneteenth is. I know what day July 4th is. It's the 4th day of July. Is Juneteenth June 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 13th? Which one is it? Is it June 114th? Where it's just a silly name. If just come up with a better name and you'll be halfway to convincing me. But none of that really matters though, because that's not why you celebrate Juneteenth or why you want others to celebrate Juneteenth. You crazy woke person are specifically not promoting Juneteenth as a good faith offer of celebration. It's a bad faith ransom of virtue. And it's a means by which someone can say simply, look, I'm a good person. New segment today, and I'm going to call it, Are You For Real? On this new segment, I stumbled across a website called iqfy. I think it's supposed to be iqfy, like smartify, like IQ being a representative of smartness, and so we make things smarter. And I'm serious. I am totally dead serious when I ask the question: is this for real? Or is this a parody site? And I would love it if you guys out there would let me know, do some research, because I scoured this page and I don't know. I can't tell if these people are for real. I'm going to read some of their about section. And I'm going to make it through. About our mission. Feminine audiences deserve something better. It's time to elevate the conversation. Hey there, waving emoji. iqfy is a lifestyle and social commentary imprint of the Sunshine Initiative. We design and publish storyful, smarter content to uplift feminine folks globally and elevate the conversation globally. I just love juxtaposing the word storyful with smarter. Oh, man. No, I'm going to make it through. Our Twitter also has the side mission of seeking out and signal boosting the smartest tweets on issues of the day. Much of our content, not all, is designed for female folks because we believe that transformative change is most easily achieved by supporting the global feminine majority, and that change-making must evolve to interface with the minutiae of life and culture, the everything is political rule, but for philanthropy and activism. We're staunchly non-partisan and have held every power under the sun to account at some point. We believe in judging every issue on its own merits and following the path of maximum good. Good morning, Team Sunshine, our story. You can read their story. You can be, and then you get to the what we are about thing, and it's a bullet point of what we're about. And in the first section, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 bullet points of what they're about. And you think, oh, okay, that's it. And then you scroll down, and there's so much more. But what we're about, building global consciousness and emotional IQ through uplifted conversations. Believing that science is true and that knowledge is power, rejecting political categorizations, labels, and other vestments of infantile discourse, disruption through creamy good writing, disruption through creamy creamy good writing that moves beyond author-reader power dynamics, writing that actually listens, integrating smart global thinking into hip culture and vice versa. No minutia of life or culture are insignificant in the change-maker mindset. It matters. Celebrating nerds and nerding out. Come see our office. Community, period. Shared experiences, period. Both under the same bullet point. Global values, comma, locally. Because, that makes sense. Customer care is audience care is customer care. Really, really getting to that storyful and smarter content. Fact-checked, true. Corporate social responsibility is necessarily smarter business, more diverse business, and ultimately more productive business. Bullet point. Being messy is valid. Every human is a storyteller. Lifting up voices, lowering down others. These are all of what they're about. Novel explorations into intersections of identity and culture. Fertilization yields quantization, yields realization, yields actualization. That's what they're about. Karen control, period. Absolutely, period. What else they're about? Staying in one's own lane as far as possible. Realistically, not always. People depicted in story photography should be roughly on the same intersectionality axes as the author and or assigned editor. The last 3 bullet points. The future is feminine, folks, and we wish to go boldly. The future is feminine, folks, and we wish to go boldly. The future is feminine, folks, and we wish to go boldly. And then the capper that makes me just wonder, is this satire? Because if it's satire, it is so good. It is such good satire. If it's not satire, oh, Lord help us. The last bit of their About page has a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that our servers are mainly located on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and we honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. As well, we offer our condolences and eternal thanks to any critters hurt by the infrastructure providing electricity to our operation. Have a sunny day. You heard all of the things about how they care about being smart and celebrating nerds and science, believing that science is true. Let's real quick click on let's look at their culture section. If you're watching this, I apologize. Here's some of their leading society and culture posts. Drag queen pastors are here and they're saving the church. Body positivity is for women, not lazy white guys with dad bods. Is coffee racist? How drinking coffee perpetuates white supremacy. Mass shootings have a race and political party. 18 ways you can spend far too much time on your phone. That one's pretty normal. It's not you. Data shows millennials are a cursed generation. 8 sweet little grandmas who committed serious crimes. The unbearable whiteness of the male gaze. Gotta love that storyful, smarter content coming out of iqfy. I really, really am curious. Please do find out for me, listeners. I need to know the answer to the question.
And I see like an old man.
The big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Please open his mouth.
Old man Joe, what you gonna tell me? Old man Joe, what you gonna say?
Today on Old Man Joe, we just take a look at one single picture. The picture you're looking at, if you are looking, is of a cheat sheet that was given to the president. Page 1 of 1. This is real. The president was actually holding this sheet given to him by his staffers and holding it backwards accidentally so that the cameras could see when he was supposed to be giving a quick little press conference. And the offshore wind dropped by. Sequence of events. These are the things that the White House staff are giving to the President of the United States in bullet point form down the page, and in all caps, you, and then switch to normal capitalization, enter the Roosevelt room and say hello to the participants. Another bullet point, you, all caps, take your, all caps, seat. Press enters is what's underneath that. Another, again, all caps, you give brief comments, in parentheses, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Next bullet point, press departs. Next bullet point, you, all caps, ask Liz Schuler, president of the AFL-CIO, a question. Note, Liz is joining virtually. And I love that note for 2 reasons. One, the press has departed. Specifically, what we all have already known, but now we have documented evidence, that the president's not allowed to answer questions off the cuff. He cannot be trusted to use his own mental faculties to speak on topics. Can't let that happen. And so the press departs before he's given the instruction to ask the press questions. And he's given the specific name of the person who he's supposed to ask. And we have to assume that this person knows that she is the one who will be asked a question and what question she will be asked. And that is all. It's astounding to me that this is the level we're at. That we're actually telling the President of the United States, go ahead and sit down. No, you need to sit down. Yeah, I gave you a note that says you sit down so that you know that you're the one who's supposed to sit down. Because otherwise, you might think that other people are supposed to sit down, and then you think that the participants and you depart. It's oh Lord, this is where we are. This is the man who's our president, holding the chief executive office in our country. The head of the executive branch of government needs to be told when to sit and when to stand in big capital letters. Pray, friends, pray. This has been Old Man Joe.
And I see like an old man.
The big difference between mostly dead and all dead. Please open his mouth.
Old Man Joe, what you gonna tell me? Old Man Joe, what you gonna say?
For Him Hype today, we're looking at Fairest, Lord Jesus. You probably, I would hope you know it. It's a very old hymn. It's Fairest, Lord Jesus, ruler of all nature, O thou of God and man the Son. Thee will I cherish, thee will I honor, thou my soul's glory, joy, and crown. Reading from 101 Hymn Stories by Kenneth Osbeck, little is known of the origin of this cherished hymn. Associated with it are several popular legends, which cannot always be substantiated by research. One of the best known accounts is that it was called the Crusaders' Hymn. Some think that it was sung by the 12th century German Crusaders, especially by their children, as they made their long and wearisome trek to the Holy Land. Another account, which has more credence, is that it was one of the hymns used by the singing followers of John Hus, a small band of believers who settled in Silesia, now part of Poland, after they were driven out of Bohemia in the bloody anti-Reformation purge of 1620. This hymn then is generally said to be a folk song derived from these devout Silesian peasants. The text of the hymn first appeared in the Roman Catholic Münster Gesangbuch, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, of 1677, where it was published as the first of 3 beautiful selected new hymns. Later, it is said that a man by the name of Hoffmann Fallersleben that's what I'm guessing, heard a group of Silesians singing the hymn in a service, recorded the words and music from this oral recitation, and published it in his recorded it in his published book in 1842. This is the form in which we now know the hymn. No one knows for certain who first translated the text from German into English. The English adaptation of Richard Storrs Willis, by which Richard Storrs Willis, born in Boston, Massachusetts, on February 10th, 1819, first appeared in his Church Chorals and Choir Studies in 1850. It is interesting to note that in this collection, a notation about the origin of the hymn is made, stating that it was sung by the German knights on the way to Jerusalem. This statement undoubtedly did much to foster and popularize the Crusader account. Richard Willis is also the composer of the Christmas carol "It Came Upon a Midnight Clear." The fourth verse, a fine translation by Joseph A. Seiss, emphasizes the dual nature of the Savior, Son of God and Son of Man, as well as the praise that he will be eternally his. The reason I picked this hymn was because I wanted to point out that sometimes songs simply have truth, and that's what makes them endure. This is a very humble, very simple praise of true things about God that is still not inane and repetitious. I'm going to read the second, third, and fourth verses. You've already heard the first one. The second one: fair are the meadows, fairer still the woodlands, robed in the blooming garb of spring. Jesus is fairer, Jesus is purer, who makes the woeful heart to sing. Very Hebrews-esque, right? Following the same basic argument of the book of Hebrews, that Jesus is better than all things before him. Fair is the sunshine, fairer still the moonlight and all the twinkling starry host. Jesus shines brighter, Jesus shines purer than all the angels heaven can boast. Beautiful Savior, Lord of the nations, Son of God and Son of Man, glory and honor, praise and oration, now and forevermore be thine. Just a simple, straightforward, clear, and true statement of who God is and why he should be honored. That's all you really need in a song. A good tune goes a long way, but that's what makes good worship music at the root of it. This hymn has endured, not because of some famous writer, not because it was particularly catchy, but because it was particularly true. We are going to go ahead and leave it there. If you wouldn't mind, I would really appreciate it if you would write to me. Send emails and stuff, send insults, send comments and questions to Stephen@reasonedrefrain.com. That's Stephen, STEPHEN, at reasonedrefrain, REASONEDREFRAIN.com. Colossians 3:16, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God. You'll hear me next time unless Jesus comes back before then. Reasoned Refrain is produced by Stephen Curto. The views and opinions expressed in this episode are my own and should not be taken as reflective of any institution with which I am associated. Theme song written and performed by J.J. Anderson and Stephen Curto, mastered by J.J. Anderson. Reasoned Refrain is the property of Stephen Curto, all rights reserved.